We welcome back one of the hosts of the Kings of Sports podcast and the Nubian Wrestling Advocates on Post Wrestling. We welcome Nate Milton back onto Hoopsology. How's it going, Nate?
What's going on, brother? And I guess technically, I don't want to be that guy on the internet, but technically, this is my first time on Hoopsology, man. Y'all done changed some things around. You done got some new furniture in the building, man. So I'm pleased to be making my first appearance on Hoopsology. How have you been, brother?
I've been pretty well. I appreciate you coming back onto the show. And what a difference a year makes, Nate.
Yes.
Just in terms, I was listening back to our previous conversation and, things were shutting down and we're talking about, okay, which league is handling the pandemic the best. And, now we got fans back. I mean, we still got the, good old Delta causing havoc, but we still got fans back in the building. So things are somewhat back to normal. What's your feeling in terms of just seeing fans back and just, in the sports and, in pro wrestling you watch? Is it weird? Is it kind of things back to normal? What's your overall feeling having fans back?
I think overall the way that I've kind of come to terms with all this, man, is we aren't going to beat COVID. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Like I hate to bring the room down, but I don't think we're ever going to beat COVID, man, just because there's way too much hesitancy with the vaccine. There's way too much misinformation. It's been politicized. And so I think what we're going to end up doing is we're going to live with COVID. COVID's going to move into the room next door. It's going to be like the flu or, like the measles or chickenpox, any of these other things where, they're still around, but we have medicines to deal with them, but they're always going to be out there. And so when you bring that to the sports world and the sports entertainment world, I think they're just going with the flow. And not only the flow of where people are right now, but the flow of the cash. That's still king. And I think, I give credit to a lot of these leagues, and I don't often give credit to the WWE, but I will. Like I give credit to WWE and AEW and Impact and some of these other companies for going fanless for as long as they did.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the dollar was going to win out. Like I'm still not comfortable. Like I just watched a whole slate of football games over the weekend from the NFL and college. I'm still not comfortable seeing these stadiums all the way full, man. But as long as people are getting vaccinated and as long as people are, being tested, I'm like, okay, like this is where we are now. This is kind of the new normal that we all kind of have to adjust with.
Yeah, it's weird. I agree with you because there's different standards for different teams in different states. So I think the Bills recently enacted a policy in which everybody has to be vaccinated, I believe. And then you see another, like my neck of the woods now in Denver, Colorado, you don't have to be vaccinated. You're going to show up in open air stadium. So it's kind of weird, the games, because I was watching the NFL too. It was weird. I mean, it's good to see football.
Here's how crazy it is, man. Like Cam Newton is basically throwing away his second chance.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want to get vaccinated. Because you can't tell me. Like I've been watching the sports shows all day, man. And they're like, oh, the Ryan Fitzpatrick is out for the season. Here's why Ron Rivera shouldn't call Cam Newton because his passing percentage is this and his interception to touchdown ratio is this. And I'm like, man, none of that matters. If Cam was vaccinated, he'd have a job. And I think the only reason he doesn't is because Ron Rivera is somebody who survived cancer and he's got, an underlying health condition. So I think if Cam had taken that shot, man, A, he probably wouldn't have gotten bounced off the Patriots, but B, he probably would have a job with the Washington football team right now. So that's how political, I guess, this has gotten, man, where like people are throwing away good money because they don't want to, get a shot or they don't want to get tested. They don't want to follow the rules. And like, let that happen to me, man. Let me find out y'all going to offer Nate Milton $1 million and say, Nate, what you got, you can get this $1 million, man, but you got to get vaccinated or you got to get tested twice a week. I'm like, okay. Look, I've gotten shots for school for less, man. Like for zero. Like that's how much I've taken them shots for, high school and college, elementary school, all that. So yeah, it makes no sense to me, man. I hate that, and it's like we've gone a long way. Like we've gone out of bounds, so to speak, on this basketball topic, man. But like I hate that things have gotten so tribal and so political. It's like, come on, man. Like I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, or whatever. Like get the shot and take care of yourself so we can. Like I just lost a friend last week, almost exactly to this day. Like last week, he's not here. He was vaccinated, but he was around people at the job who had COVID. And it's like, come on, man. Like, we losing too many brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and grandparents. Like, let's go ahead and stop this, man.
Yeah, I feel you. I mean, I almost lost my cousin in Louisiana working in corrections. That's before the vaccine. So he wasn't afforded the opportunity to have that the vaccination, and he survived. He's fine, but that was a close call. So it's definitely, it seems pretty obvious, but I mean, you're right. It's just gone so politicized and so many misinformation. It's just kind of a mess. Yep. I want to get your thoughts on the NBA season. Just your thoughts on what we saw with the Bucks and Suns. Were you into it? Were you not? Because Kevin Durant stepped his foot on the line and basically not the Nets out. What was your feelings on seeing Giannis win it all this year?
It was cool. Like, I think Giannis is somebody who has been ready for a long time. You know, to go back to that pro wrestling, like Giannis is like Big E, right, who recently won, the WWE championship. Like, Giannis has been ready, just like Big E's been ready, like the last 4 or 5 years. And so to see him take that next step was great. I honestly was rooting for the Suns just sympathetically for Chris Paul, because that's, you talk about doing it for a long time. Like, I was hoping that this would be the year for Chris Paul, but you can't knock the Bucks. I think Drew Holiday was an underrated signing. It's weird because I think Drew Holiday was underrated, but he still was overpaid. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Totally.
I think what Drew brings to the table is so specific in terms of that defense, particularly on the perimeter. But I think they overpaid for it. But you got a chip, so you got what you paid for. I think my only negative feelings toward the Bucks, and part of this is being an Atlanta Hawks fan. That's my squad. Yeah. But I think the other thing is, and I don't know where this happened, and again, it kind of ties into what we were talking about just a little while ago with people being tribal, but like, people just can't be happy for Giannis, right? We got to use Giannis and the Bucks winning as a way to bash LeBron. Like, Giannis did it without a super team. Like, come on, man. Like what? This is what we doing. Like, we not celebrating what Giannis and these boys did. We just using it as a way to continue that age-old LeBron versus Jordan battle, which is another thing that just, I think the older I get, the less time I have kind of for conversations like that. Like, when I was 20, 25, 30 even, those are good barroom conversations. Those are good conversations when you just drinking with your buddies. Like, no, man, LeBron did this, or MJ did that. What about Scottie Pippen? No, man, don't nobody want to talk about Scottie Pippen. What about Charles Barkley? Those are good conversations. But I'm 40 years old, man. Like, I don't have time to go back and forth with people like this, man. Like, Jordan is great. LeBron is great. Let them both be great, man.
Well, my word is that we're going to kind of hear this conversation next season, I'm afraid. So I'm sorry to break it to you, Nate, just because of just talking to other, and I hate the conversation too. I think it's pretty, I'm over it as well. Just seeing next season, people declaring the Nets and the Lakers as a foregone conclusion. They're going to be in the NBA Finals. And if no matter what happens to LeBron, either he's going to be praised or I guess criticized either way at some point, depending on the roster. What's your overall feeling of next season? Because I've heard some people be really kind of depressed, just, as a foregone conclusion that, you're going to see Kevin Durant versus LeBron, or there's just some optimism in terms of, like, there's a lot of relevant teams. Like, I'm a Bulls fan. They're relevant based on their offseason moves. I'm pretty pessimistic. The play-in tournament, they're in line to make some noise in the first round. That's what I expect what they're going to do. But it seems like there's a lot more teams, at least with an exciting couple of players, instead of just, and traditionally some NBA franchises having nothing and just them, whenever they're on national TV, being boring to watch. So where do you lie in terms of your optimism for next season?
I think, first of all, like, shout out to that man, the good brother, Adam Silver, because I love the play-in tournament, man. I think the play-in tournament is a really fun addition to the NBA, and I'm glad they're keeping it around. I think when you look at this being a foregone conclusion, I don't think it's that way. I think Nets-Lakers is probably the most likely outcome, but like this year, you would have said the Nets are probably going to beat the Bucks, but Kyrie doesn't play, and Harden's banged up, and Kevin Durant is wearing a shoe one size too big. And here we are with the Bucks hoisting that Larry O'Brien. So I think the East has gotten better when you talk about the Bucks, the Nets, and then I think you take like a slight step down, and you get to the 76ers. They've got questions. What are they going to do with your boy Ben Simmons out here, whose trade value seems to be going down by the day, which like I get it given that postseason performance, but somebody's going to come away with a good little steal here for Ben Simmons, because I think all he needs is a change of scenery. I mentioned the Atlanta Hawks, man. Like, we brought back Trae. We brought back John Collins. Like, I think this is a team on the come up, because they were a year ahead of schedule last year, I think. And when Nate McMillan took over, you just saw the potential of that team unlocked. It was like Nate came in with the cheat codes and was like, okay, this is how we're going to play. And I think Trae Young is ready to take that next step. The Miami Heat. I'm not a huge Heat fan, but I do think bringing in Kyle Lowry, like, that's a good move for that team. I was hoping he was going to reteam with DeMar DeRozan one last time, but we didn't get that. But I think the Heat will be good. Like, the Bulls will be in the mix. Like, I don't think the Bulls will be in like that top 5 or 6, but they'll be in the mix in that like 7 to 10. Like the Knicks are going to be in the mix. So I think the East is still not as good as the West, but it's better than it has been in years. In terms of the West, man, like, I need people to make up their mind on the Lakers. Are the Lakers like this decrepit group of over-the-hill people that can't ball no more, or are they the Monstars? Because I've heard it both ways, man. Like it's like they're so old, but LeBron's cheating. He brought all these people on his team. Like, come on, man. I think the Lakers would be my pick just based on rosters and based on the assumption of health, but I wouldn't rule out, Denver. I wouldn't rule out Utah. I wouldn't rule out, what are the Clippers going to do? I wouldn't. The Clippers are interesting to me because, like, we saw what Paul George was without Kawhi in a postseason run. Can he do that for most, if not all, of next season? Like, that's going to be the question. Can Paul George be that guy? I'm not sure. The Warriors. Like, I think the Warriors are a really interesting team to look at. They could be anywhere from the 4th best team in the conference to the 12th best team. Like, I think the spectrum, the pendulum can swing that wide. And then, of course, the Suns. Like, I think the Suns are going to be right back there in the mix. And the Blazers, man. Like, the Blazers with Dame and them. So I'm excited, man. Like, I think, yes, there are favorites, with the Lakers and the Nets, but it's not a foregone conclusion, man. Like, as the cliche would go, that's why they play the games, man.
Yeah, it's true. I feel you. I'm pretty excited for this season to get underway, considering all the different storylines happening. And I think with, like, you brought up the Clippers, they're such a weird team because I feel like every year they're brought to be the favorites to win it all. And then somehow something horrible happens and they're taken out. And I feel like their kryptonite might be the Warriors, like you were saying, because, with the healthy Steph and Klay Thompson, and not to mention with Draymond, and, some people have criticized in terms of him taking a step back, but he's still a factor on that team. So I think the Warriors are going to be better than what people anticipated. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the Warriors back in that playoff mix. Now, you mentioned Trae Young. So we talked about the basketball. Let's get to the wrestling. And I had Brian H. Waters on, and he was talking about how Trae Young, he looked good as a heel, but he looked green in terms of his first appearance on there. So, but my question to you being an Atlanta Hawks fan, and kind of, we have this kind of, I don't know what you would call it, AEW, WWE war kind of going on here. Is there a chance with Trae Young being involved with this, New Year's, I think it's Day pay-per-view, I always forget, it's New Year's Day or Eve thing they're doing WWE. Do you see Trae Young actually stepping into the ring? I mean, just because, it's different. The WWE wants, it's popping a rating. You've seen Big E win the title. Maybe that'd be a response to what AEW did. Yeah. And now you have a lot more of these athletes, crossing over to the ring. Is it possible we see Trae Young participate? Would that make you nervous, considering that's right in the middle of the season?
Well, I was just going to say, like, it doesn't matter, my opinion, because the Hawks would never let it happen. Like, This man, the ink has not dried on that new contract extension. Like, I think, they would let him do something like he did on SmackDown, like he'd be involved in an angle. But in terms of, like, taking bumps, like, nah, like, I doubt they would let him do that. Okay. I would like to see Trae. Like, Trae's a natural, though. Like, I think some guys, you can tell they are there just because it's an obligation and, it's something that was arranged through the public relations team. And some guys, you can tell, are fans and they want to be there. And it felt like Trae knew what the deal was, and he was excited to be a part of the show.
Yeah, I agree. He loves being the villain, and that's what I liked about him, especially playing the Knicks. I enjoyed that so much because I feel like there's a lot of players, and I said this before, that they're worried about their social media followers. So if they do anything to antagonize the other team, they have to apologize and backtrack. And Trae Young is just not even doing that. Even when Drake's album came out, he was still antagonizing New York. So I love it. I'm all for just him being one of the most hated players in the NBA.
I love Trae. Like, people always make the comparison to Steph. Like, that was the early comparisons when Trae was coming out of college. I think to me, Trae is like less of Steph and more like a Reggie Miller that's a really good passer.
Agreed. Yep.
Like, I think that's what kind of the mold Trae fits. Like, he's not as big and, strong as Reggie, but I think he's more in that Reggie Miller mold than a Steph Curry personally.
I agree. And I love just the killer instinct in him antagonizing the fans. I don't think you see that through other players in the league. Even someone like Draymond, who's, he's hot-headed, but I don't think you've seen him. Or even Westbrook, he's gotten into it with the opposing teams' fans, but he's never like openly antagonistic against them like Trae Young is. And I'm all about it. It's weird because when I was younger, I can totally put my mindset into rooting against the other team playing the Bulls. But now, as being older, I appreciate heels. So it's one of those things. If he's like antagonizing Chicago, it's like, I'm supposed to hate you right now, but I'm enjoying your performance. So it's a little bit of conflict. What's going on? But I want to talk to you about kind of the wrestling landscape, and this is appropriate, one day after Big E winning the title. What are your overall feelings with Big E's journey? I feel it was a really cool moment in terms of him winning the title, but it's about follow-up. So if he drops the belt in 2 weeks, I mean, what does it matter him winning the championship? So what are your feelings about how they did it? Hot crowd, if they're into him winning it. Do you see a long title run for Big E, or do you think this is something that, Bobby Lashley will beat him in a couple of months?
So many things, man. So many ways I can go on this. And here's the thing. Like, first of all, shout out to Bobby Lashley, because I think, Bobby Lashley and MVP did an underrated job with that belt.
Yep.
And like MVP did like something small MVP did in the show last night was at the opening segment, when it was getting too much of the focus on Randy Orton and Bobby Lashley, MVP made sure to turn the focus back to Big E in that opening segment, because he knew where, the story was going. So I think MVP and Lashley deserve a lot of credit. I like Big E a lot, man. Anybody that's listened to me over the years, like, I think, somebody mentioned to me on Twitter last night, they're like, you've been calling this for at least 5 years. And I had to go back and look, and like, yeah, I have. Like, even before Kofi Mania, I was like, Big E's the guy. Like,
agreed. Yeah.
He makes the most sense. Like, he's got the size that a Vince McMahon likes. He's got the personality that can transcend wrestling. And like, you can put him on the late night shows. You can put him on the morning shows. He can go on the local news programs. Like, he's somebody that can appeal to the wrestling fans, but also he can appeal to somebody's grandma.
Yeah.
And so I knew that, like, he had what it took. My only thing is, like you said, one, the follow through, but B, like, I wasn't the biggest fan of how we got to this moment. Like, the moment was a great moment, but they announced it on Twitter 5 hours before the show.
Yeah.
And it seemed very much a reactionary move in response to both AEW's recent success and Monday Night Football. And so I'm like, this should have been a bigger moment where we built up to it and then we pulled the trigger. But that being said, like, I'm hoping, and I've used this term with a couple people so far, today, I hope this is a reverse Kofi. And what I mean by that is, like, Kofi had one of the greatest title wins that I've ever seen in my life, personally. And then the title reign was just kind of, just kind of there.
Yeah.
I hope Big E is the exact opposite, where the title win, like, it was a cool moment, but it could have been so much bigger. But hopefully that sets up this great reign that isn't truncated, that isn't interrupted. Like, Brock Lesnar doesn't show up and beat Big E in 10 seconds. Like, nah, we don't need that. Like, they need to, and I think Andrew Thompson said this on Post Wrestling on the Raw review with John Pollock that night. Yeah. Like, treat Big E the same way you would treat a Roman Reigns or a John Cena. Like, this is supposed to be your new champ. Treat him like you would treat a Brock Lesnar. And I hope they do that, man, because Big E is somebody, and we saw the response last night from a lot of the wrestlers, in other companies that are happy about this. Like, he seems like a good dude, and he's a great pick for me, in my opinion, to be your top champion. Hopefully, they don't drop the ball with him, which is always something you worry about, with this company.
Yeah, I feel you. I'm the first to bash WWE. At the same time, their track record has been pretty good with their champions, with Roman, with Drew McIntyre. So hopefully to keep that trend going with Big E. I think he's just multifaceted in terms of him as a personality, not only in terms of the racial component, but also just him as just the mental health awareness. Just listening to that recent Feel the Power podcast. He's just such a multifaceted human being, so fascinating to listen to, which I'll admit, I didn't think he was that when first seeing him in FCW, just in terms of just, how he was first portrayed, but just seeing him over the years. Right. I mean, I'm right there with you, Nate, in terms of
the problem was you only were watching for 3 years, and 3 ain't enough. You needed 5.
That's right. That's for sure. That's totally true. On to that point, though, that the 5 count, I knew, like, this guy's going to be a megastar if they push him. So I think that's something that we'll have to wait and see what happens.
And they've got a built-in match ready for Goldberg. Big meaty men slapping meat. They got that ready, and so
that has to happen.
I don't know if that happens at the Saudi Arabia show. I hope it doesn't happen at the Saudi Arabia show. I hope they save that for one of these smaller pay-per-views, or you could even do that at a Royal Rumble, and I think people would get hyped for Big E and Goldberg as a one-off.
Well, I'm worried, though, you brought up that Brock Lesnar scenario. You just switch out Brock Lesnar to Goldberg, and it's 10 seconds, and it's over. So that makes me nervous. I think I'm down for the match. I'm just worried about the outcome. I'm just be sweating, hoping that Big E retains.
Yeah, it would be so disrespectful. I'm hoping they learn from Kofi. Because here's the thing. Like, I'm not upset that Kofi lost, because all championship reigns end.
Sure.
It's how you did it, man. And then I felt that it was really disrespectful to Kofi to have him just blown out like that, and then not even mention it or bring it up ever again.
He's smiling weeks afterwards.
Like, okay, that was nice. I guess I'll go back to being me.
Right. Yeah, totally. I hope that's not the outcome. Nate, I want to bring up another point I've seen on Twitter, and I want to get your opinion on this. It's a sentiment that I don't necessarily feel, but it's something that's been brought up in regards to AEW, and that is in terms of them pushing, black wrestlers. Yeah. So I don't know. My opinion is you kind of have to pick the best talent available, right? So look at Jay Lethal's currently signed. Jonathan Gresham's currently signed. Moose is currently signed. So I would say the guys that are not in AEW and in WWE, they're all signed under contract. So if you look at AEW as a whole, looking at it objectively, are you going to be pushing like Lee Moriarty? He just got there. I mean, he's great. I never even heard of him before he got to AEW, but he's awesome.
He's fantastic.
He's incredible. At the same time, I mean, are you going to push him ahead of Jungle Boy, who's already established? Probably not.
No.
And with Jay Cargill, who I feel is going to be, who's Bianca Belair 2.0. I'm a huge fan of hers. She's a massive star, but I think she's green. I don't think she should be beating Britt Baker right now.
No. So I don't even want, I want somebody to beat Britt, maybe Thunder Rosa, maybe Ruby Soho, and then that's where Jade fits in.
For sure. So this whole thing about them not pushing black wrestlers in particular, I don't understand that. When, if you want to talk about the entire diversity and look at their women's division, when them pushing the Japanese wrestlers, and look at their AEW tag team champions right now with the Lucha Brothers. So it's a situation in which I disagree with it. And I don't think AEW should be blamed with any malice in the situation, just due to the talent that's on the roster and due to the free agents that are available. But am I missing something? Is there something that I'm not seeing here in terms of this whole thing that's going on?
We've talked about this a couple times on the Nubian Wrestling Advocates over at Post. I think, and let me make sure that people understand this. I don't think Tony Khan is racist, and for that matter, I don't even think Vince McMahon is racist.
Sure.
I do think, though, that there can be a lack of awareness.
Sure.
And I think that when you look at AEW, and this is why I kind of give AEW a benefit of the doubt that I don't give WWE, because you're comparing one company in the WWE that's been around over 50 years versus one company that hasn't been around 50 months.
Yep.
So I do think you got to give them some time. I do think, though, that when you, and this is more of the finger that I would point at AEW, when you come out at the beginning and you say, we're these change agents, and you kind of get people's hopes and expectations up and then don't deliver, I think that's where you kind of get some pushback. So, like, let's look at the roster, like you said. Like, I think that they've got some really good young black talent. And that's the thing. Like, they got a lot of, the Acclaimed and Private Party. And, they just signed Lee Moriarty, like you said. Power. Like, I think Powerhouse Hobbs is a future main eventer.
Agreed. Yep.
Sonny Kiss is somebody who they rarely use, but I think Sonny Kiss is somebody that could be a star. I think, honestly, if I'm going who's the black wrestler that could be in the mix right now, I think your two options would have been Scorpio Sky or Ricky Starks. Because I think Ricky Starks is another $1 million performer waiting to happen. But I think, and I think part of it is, who are you giving TV time to if not your black talent? Because I think a lot of this happened, or a lot of these feelings came back up after All Out, which was a fantastic show, man.
Agreed.
Like, to me,
yes.
Like, I've seen some people say it's the best show of all time. Like, I'm not going to go that crazy. I'd say, like, it's the best show. It's one of the best North American shows of the last 10 years, though. Easily.
Sure. Easily, yeah.
But the issue is when you look at a main card and there are only 2 black females on your main card and no black men on the main card, but we still have time for QT Marshall.
Yeah.
And Paul White. And so it's like I think the way you put your shows together is something that they're aware of. And I think Tony Khan is cognizant of this because, he signed Lee Moriarty. He mentioned that he's still, in communication with Leo Rush, who I think,
sure, yes.
I think a motivated Leo Rush in AEW could be a big win for that company. So I guess, long answer short, even though it's kind of been a long answer.
No.
There's things they need to tighten up, much like their women's division. Like, I like a lot of their talent, but they need to kind of tighten up the way we present these women on TV and give them more than just one match per week, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's things they can do to tighten things up. I think the worst thing they could do, though, would be to try to chase. And WWE put the belt on Big E. Let's throw the belt on Hobbs next week. Like, that doesn't work. Like, you got to build these stories up. And so, like, I have faith because this company has shown me when we notice something doesn't work, like the Dark Order, when the Dark Order first started,
exactly,
we course correct. When, you mentioned Britt Baker and how much of a star she is. When she started, Britt Baker was a little shaky there, and they course corrected. So I think this is another thing that they'll have to course correct. And, I still give them the benefit of the doubt. So, like, I understand why you would say, like, I don't see any overt, prejudice here. And I don't think there is. I just think it's more of the company has to kind of shuffle some things around and make sure that we're taking care of all of our fan base. Because like I said, they came out and they're like, hey, we're the different company. We're here for everybody, all the fans. So, like, just make sure they're living up to their word is what I would say.
I understand. I think the course corrections you saw with the women's division, that was kind of falling off in the beginning with AEW. And we've seen a huge improvement with that. I will say with Scorpio Sky, I'm a fan of his in-ring work as a personality. I am not, compared to Ricky Starks, who is already like a huge star,
Ricky
right?
Starks is money.
Like, he's money. Like, he's money. I think he's underutilized in this Team Taz situation. If he's gonna, he'll be, if he beat Brian Cage and then he faces CM Punk, I think that's a good, like, first major feud for him. And I think that addresses some of that kind of missing gap that you were talking about. But I think, like, even if you look at Scorpio Sky, I still think of it as kind of a project. Like, he's in Men of the Year. He's with Dan Lambert.
I think with Scorpio, it's already interrupt, but I think with Scorpio is they started something and then they took a step back.
That's true.
With Scorpio. Because, like, if you go back to, year 1 of Dynamite, I think they were setting Scorpio up for something. He had the matches with Jericho.
Yep.
Like, I think they were setting it up and then they didn't know what to do. And so they're to their credit, they're like, we're not going to take you off of TV, but we're going to throw you in this tag team. And I like Ethan Page a lot too, but I don't think this association with Dan Lambert is doing anything for either one of them.
Me either. I agree. And I wonder, is it a situation of, not catering to a certain fan base, or them just having tons of talent? Like, I worry about Adam Cole. Like, he's in the elite.
That's the other problem. Like we've got so many mouths to feed. Like, it's to go back to the NBA, it's like if I've got a team where I've got one center, I got a couple bigs, and then I've got 5 shooting guards. It's not enough. There's not enough shots to go around for all those shooting guards.
Yeah.
And so it's like, we bring in Punk, big move. We bring in Adam Cole, big move. We bring in, Daniel Bryan Danielson, big move.
Yeah.
And, they may not be done if rumors are to be believed. Could see Kevin Steen show up early next year. So, Bray Wyatt's still kind of hanging out there. So, like, I think that one of the big challenges they're going to have to face over the next few months is, where do we slot all of these people? And how do we tell these stories? Because I agree. Like, I'm a big fan of Adam Page. And as much as I like Punk and Bryan, I don't want to see these guys jump the line and cut off a story that we've been building for over a year with Hangman versus Omega. So, like, I think it's a matter of just kind of figuring out the roster. Like, right now, Tony Khan is sitting there in the bedroom and he's got like 100 action figures. And it's like, which action figure do I put in this match? And who do I like? So I think it's going to take a little bit of time for him to kind of figure everything out. But I also think, getting back to the idea of, representation, something as simple as, we get a powerhouse Hobbs match every week, or we get a Ricky Starks. Like, because I think part of the issue, like why a lot of fans might be like, there's nobody ready, is because they're not getting time on Dynamite. Yeah. Like, they're getting time on Dark and Elevation, which is cool, but we're not seeing them on Dark. We're not seeing them on Dynamite. And I think, that first Lee Moriarty match on Dynamite, like, put him in there with Daniel Garcia, run that match back from Dark and, like, let him go. Because I think Lee Moriarty is somebody who's going to pop to people. So it's just, we've got to both cater to an audience, we've got to cater to a locker room, and we've also got to make sure all of our stories are coherent. And so it's a big job, man. It's a big task, but that's why they pay Tony Khan the big bucks, even though he's not really getting paid. He's the one paying.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. I totally feel you. And I think Rampage is going to have to go to 2 hours. I just don't see how that's an hour show. That's like impossible.
Like, it's got to go to 2 hours. And honestly, I would think about moving nights, because
I agree.
If you're at 10 o'clock, so you're going 10 to 12 on a Friday, like, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah. Especially now, I mean, everybody's going out on a Friday. People are pent up, so they don't want to be in the house. So I feel you. I think it's going to be very interesting to see just what AEW does. And you mentioned, I mean, they cut off Minoru Suzuki's entrance. Even before that, you saw Tony Schiavone just like speaking like 10,000 miles per hour because he has to plug.
Well, that's another incident right there, like the Suzuki incident. That's another issue of course correcting. Like, we screwed up with the entrance, so we're gonna run it back with this tag match. So I think that shows you how good they are at, like, okay, we made a mistake, let's try to correct that. And I think, the same thing goes to, when it comes to their black talent. They're like, oh, maybe this is something we didn't do on purpose, but maybe we just kind of overlooked some of you guys. So let's try to fix that in the coming months.
Well, I guess my fear, another concern I had is, it popped in my mind with the MJF promo that he did with Brian Pillman Jr., because I think MJF is a fantastic heel, but I do think he crossed the line. I mean, I understand getting heel heat, but at the same time, MJF he's not some rinky-dink heel from some random town. He's MJF, and he could have destroyed Brian Pillman Jr. without resorting to just going through all those cheap tactics. And I guess my fear is, if you want to do storylines relatable to certain audiences, they're just going to resort to just typical storylines that we've seen a million times, or that's really offensive. That kind of scared me, that promo, because that's kind of a thing where you see Will Hobbs, where if they give him a storyline that's going to have the intentions of getting him over, it might go down a WWE line of being
Triple H Booker T.
Yeah, it's concern. It's a concern of mine, and I think that's more of a kind of trigger to me than them not pushing their black talent is where
we saw the same thing with Dante Martin.
Yes.
With Dante Martin,
he's
with
incredible.
His rap. Yeah. I love Dante Martin, but it's like, I think the blessing of AEW is they're giving these talents a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
But that comes at a cost sometimes. It's like you have to know where the line is and how to walk right up to it without crossing it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Nate, I really enjoyed the chat. Thanks for coming on the show once again. Really appreciate it. And we'll have to just wait and see how this all turns out. I'm excited, as a wrestling fan and as an NBA fan too, to see all these, players involved. I'm curious to see what Enes Kanter, he keeps teasing like he's going to step in the ring and like he doesn't. So I'm curious to see how that dynamic continues to flow with pro wrestling in the NBA.
I mean, the return to the ring we all need.
Right.
was not Enes Kanter, not Trae Young. It's a young man who first made his WWE debut in the Staples Center alongside his father.
Oh,
and now he is become an NBA bona fide caliber talent. We need the return of LaMelo Ball to the squared circle.
Oh my gosh. If he gets I don't know what would happen if you get his dad and you get the Paul brothers involved, and my head might explode. That's a lethal combination.
Like Lonzo, I think, just thinking back to your Bulls, like I like Lonzo a lot. I like Lonzo more than most people. He's never going to be that dude that's like lighting up the scoreboard like a Trae Young, but I think he scores enough, and he's a great passer. And I think I call me old school, but I love point guards that pass first, and that's kind of Lonzo's game.
Yeah, I see his potential for sure. I'm optimistic. We'll see what happens. Nate, please let our listeners and viewers know where they can find you on social media, and then all the great podcasts that you do. Yeah, please fill them in.
Well, thank you so much for having me, brother. It was cool hanging out with you again in the new studio here. Even though like it's 90 degrees here in Virginia, so I'm glad to be somewhere cool. But thank you for the invite, man. We'll definitely have to chop it up again down the line when some of these predictions either come true or they fall flat.
Right.
But if you want to hear more from me, you can check me out on Twitter at @8 MOZAIK at Nate Mosaic. You can check out the Kings of Sport, which is my main podcast. It was me and Marcus Vanderberg of ESPN, but Marcus has left to concentrate on the mothership. So now it's me and a rotating panel of guests until we kind of figure out what the ultimate mix is. We're on episode 297. So we're 3 away from that magic number of episode 300. So there may or may not be an announcement in 3 episodes about the future of the show. We've got a Patreon, patreon.com/the Kings of Sport. $5 gets you in the door if you want to support us. We've got over 200 hours of audio and video. We've got sports shows, politics, wrestling. We've got the MCU reviews. So a lot of stuff up there on the Patreon if people are interested in hearing thoughts and opinions of me and my friends. We got a show on there. You talk about mental health earlier. We got a show called TDT Talks, which is the darkest timeline. And, it's me and Steve Willie, my friend and podcaster who is a therapist. And we just kind of, meet with other podcasters and have like a counseling session, so to speak. So that's up there, man. Post Wrestling is where you can find both the Rocky Maivia Picture Show, which is a movie review show about the movies of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and as you mentioned off the top, brother, the Nubian Wrestling Advocates, which is the newest addition to the Post Wrestling family. It's myself, Chris Ely, aka the Professor, and Andrew Thompson, the youngest in charge. And it's a great show because I think, just kind of like the conversation we just had, you can look at the same thing and have different viewpoints, but still, be cool and still have a great conversation about it. It doesn't have to be so tribal. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you have a different opinion than me. You're wrong.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we talk about. We talk about pro wrestling and the business from the perspective of Black fans and Black journalists. And, it's been fun so far. And we've had a great kind of conversation. This next episode, which we'll probably record in a couple weeks, is going to be pretty wild. because we could either be really, really happy with how Big E's title run is going, or we could be really, really mad because Goldberg came in and squashed him in 15 seconds, man.
That is true.
You never know.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the Bianca Belair situation, I mean.
Yes. And we talk about that on the latest edition of the show.
Yeah, so I think it can go either way, but I'm hoping it's a successful title reign for Big E, and I hope you guys have shining moments to talk about in terms of his title reign compared to the opposite scenario. Nate, thank you very much for joining. Really appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate you, man. Keep going. Like I love the new look, and
appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll come back through when Trae and them boys host that Larry O'Brien Trophy.
Definitely looking forward to
maybe sooner because that might be a while.
Thanks, Nate.